Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Michael always believed he knew his wife Sarah better than anyone in the world. 15 years of marriage, 2 kids, a house in the Denver suburbs, and a routine that felt as solid as stone. He worked as a civil engineer for a mid-sized company, while Sarah was a marketing manager at Sterling and Associates, one of the largest advertising agencies in the area. Their lives followed a comfortable and predictable pattern until small details began to change in almost imperceptible ways. At first, Michael thought he was imagining things. Sarah had always been a loving woman who enjoyed long hugs before bed and slow kisses in the morning. But in recent weeks, she seemed distracted, like her mind was always somewhere else. When he tried to talk about her day at work, the answers came short and vague. She said everything was fine, just tired from the new projects the Sterling and Associates had taken on. Michael accepted the explanation. After all, he himself had gone through stressful periods at work. However, other changes began to emerge. Sarah started taking longer showers, always bringing her phone into the bathroom. Before, she left the device charging in the kitchen or on the nightstand, but now the phone never left her hands. When it rang, she would step away to answer, speaking in a low voice. She said they were agency matters, last-minute meetings, demanding clients. Michael tried not to pay attention, but an uncomfortable feeling began to grow in his chest. The change in Sarah's behavior intensified when she started going out more often during the week. Before, the only evening outings were couples' dinners with friends or school events for the kids. Now, she had happy hours with coworkers, meetings that stretched late into the night, networking events that seemed suspiciously frequent. Michael tried to be understanding. After all, the marketing industry required relationships and social presence. But when he asked details about these events, Sarah quickly changed the subject or gave vague information that didn't make much sense. She also started dressing differently. Tighter clothes, more elaborate makeup even for work, new perfumes he had never seen before. When Michael complimented her, saying she looked beautiful, Sarah smiled in a strange way, as if keeping a secret. The intimacy between them also changed drastically. Sarah, who had always been a passionate and present partner, became distant physically. Affection decreased, intimate moments became rare and mechanical. When Michael tried to get close, she claimed exhaustion, headaches, or simply turned to the other side of the bed. He tried talking about this several times, but Sarah always avoided the topic, promising things would return to normal once the work calmed down. The kids also began to notice the changes. Emma, 12 years old, asked Michael why their mom was always on the phone and seemed not to pay attention when they talked about school. Jake, 9 years old, complained that Sarah had missed his soccer game for the 3rd time in a row, something that had never happened before. Michael found himself taking over the emotional absence of his wife, assuming responsibilities that had previously been shared equally. He started taking the kids to all their commitments, helping with homework, and even cooking most of the meals. Sarah arrived home late, ate quickly, and went upstairs to her room, always with the phone in hand. During the weekends, which used to be dedicated to family time, Sarah made up last-minute commitments. She said she needed to work at the office some Saturdays, or that there were important meetings on Sundays. Michael offered to accompany her, but she always refused, saying it would be boring for him. With each refusal, Michael's suspicion grew a little more, like a seed of bitterness slowly sprouting in his heart. The situation reached a critical point on a Thursday in March. Sarah said she needed to travel to Miami for the weekend for a marketing conference. It was strange because she had never mentioned this conference before, and Michael knew that Sterling and Associates rarely sent employees to expensive events without prior planning. When he asked details about the conference, Sarah got angry, saying he was being possessive and suspicious. She packed her bags on Friday morning, gave a quick kiss to the kids, and left, promising to return Sunday night. Michael felt a terrible sensation in his stomach, like something very bad was about to happen. He tried to focus on work, but couldn't stop thinking about his wife. During lunch, he decided to call the Sterling and Associates office where Sarah worked, just to confirm she had really traveled for business. The receptionist, who knew Michael from company events, confirmed that yes, Sarah was attending a conference in Miami representing the agency and would return on Sunday as planned. Michael felt momentarily relieved, but something still deeply bothered him. The explanation was correct, but Sarah's strange behaviors continued without justification. Why was she so distant if it was just work? Why that drastic personality change? On Saturday afternoon, while trying to distract himself watching TV with the kids, his phone rang. It was Josh, his best friend since college, who worked as a consultant and traveled constantly for business. Josh's voice sounded hesitant and uncomfortable when he said he needed to talk to Michael about something delicate. Josh explained that he was staying at the Marriott in Miami for a business meeting and that, by a terrible coincidence, he had seen Sarah in the hotel pool area. Michael felt his heart race, but said he knew she was there for business for the conference. Josh paused for a long time before continuing, saying that Sarah wasn't alone and that what he had witnessed was much more serious than a simple professional meeting. In a choked voice, Josh told Michael that he had seen Sarah kissing passionately and engaging in intimate acts with a man in the pool, and that he had discreetly recorded a short video on his phone because he knew Michael would need to see it to believe it. He immediately sent the video via message. Michael locked himself in the bathroom at home to watch the video, away from the eyes of the children. The images were shocking and undeniable. Sarah was in the hotel pool, wearing a bikini he had never seen before, hugging and kissing passionately with a man. They behaved like a couple on a honeymoon, with intimate touches and loving glances. Michael watched the video 3 times, each time more painful than the previous one. On the 3rd time, he focused on the man's face and felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. It was Richard Thompson, the executive director of Sterling and Associates, Sarah's direct boss. Michael knew him personally from the annual company events and from some parties they had attended together. Seeing Sarah cheating on her marriage was devastating enough, but discovering that it was with her own boss, a married man she saw every day at work, made everything even more shocking and calculated. Michael realized that the trip to Miami wasn't just an opportunity for infidelity, but probably the culmination of a relationship that had been happening for months right at Sterling and Associates. Michael spent the rest of Saturday in a controlled state of shock, trying to process what he had discovered. He couldn't get the images of Sarah and Richard together in the pool out of his mind, behaving like lovers on a honeymoon. When the kids asked why he was so quiet, he made up an excuse about a headache. That night, after Emma and Jake went to sleep, Michael stayed awake in the living room, watching the video repeatedly and trying to understand how he had been so blind to the signs. He realized that all the changes in Sarah's behavior now made sense. The extended happy hours, the last-minute meetings, the physical and emotional distance, everything was connected to the relationship she had with Richard. On Sunday morning, after a practically sleepless night, Michael made a decision that would change everything. He didn't want to confront Sarah without a clear plan, but he knew he needed to act immediately after she returned from the trip. Michael's hands trembled as he saved the video Josh had sent and took screenshots of the most compromising images. He also did a quick search on Richard Thompson and found information about his family, including the address of his house and details about his wife Patricia. Michael realized that Patricia deserved to know the truth just as much as he had. But before taking any action regarding Richard's family, he needed to confront his own reality. Sarah hadn't just lied about her feelings, she had transformed a legitimate business trip into a romantic getaway with her boss, using resources from Sterling and Associates to finance her infidelity. Michael printed the screenshots from the video and sat on the edge of the bed he had shared with Sarah for 15 years, feeling a mix of relief for finally having the truth and deep pain for confirming his worst fears. But the pain lasted only a few minutes. A cold, calculating determination began to take over him, replacing the anguish with the need to act smartly and decisively. Michael spent the entire Sunday planning his response. He didn't want to just confront Sarah and have an emotional fight that wouldn't lead anywhere. He wanted justice, he wanted her and Richard to face the consequences of their choices completely and definitively. First, he called a divorce lawyer recommended by a colleague a few years ago. Even though it was Sunday, the lawyer agreed to meet him at the office for an emergency consultation. Michael showed the video Josh had recorded and all the evidence he had gathered, and the lawyer confirmed that he had more than enough material for a divorce case based on infidelity. They discussed child custody, asset division, and alimony. Michael learned that considering Sarah's proven infidelity and her stable financial situation, he had a good chance of getting primary custody of the kids. The lawyer warned him not to confront Sarah directly yet, but rather to gather more evidence and prepare all the legal documents before taking any steps. However, Michael had already made his decision about how to handle the situation. He didn't want a long and draining process. He wanted Sarah to know immediately that he knew everything, and he wanted her to face the consequences quickly and definitively. Sunday night, Sarah returned from the trip radiant and relaxed, with a light tan and a smile Michael hadn't seen in months. She brought small gifts for the kids and told vague stories about the conference, talking about inspiring talks and valuable professional contacts she had made in Miami. Michael watched her speak, noticing how she seemed renewed and happy, probably from the intense days she had spent with Richard at the hotel. He responded with monosyllables, saying he was tired and that it had been a hard weekend with the kids. Sarah didn't seem to notice his coldness, or if she did, she didn't show it. She took a long shower, as had become her habit, and went to bed early, claiming fatigue from the trip. Michael stayed awake next to her all night, staring at the ceiling and finalizing his plan mentally. On Monday morning, he woke up before Sarah, prepared breakfast for the kids as he always did, and said goodbye with longer hugs than usual. Sarah came down hurriedly, as always, grabbed a cup of coffee, and said she needed to arrive early at Sterling and Associates to catch up on projects after the trip. Michael just nodded and watched her leave, knowing it would be the last time she left that house as his wife. Michael arrived at work normally, but asked to leave early, citing urgent personal issues. He went straight to the lawyer's office, where he signed all the divorce papers and authorized the immediate start of the process. Then, he contacted a moving company and booked an express service to remove all of Sarah's clothes and personal belongings from the house that same afternoon. He didn't want to destroy her things, just wanted her to know she wasn't welcome anymore in their home. The movers were extremely professional and efficient, packing everything into labeled boxes and loading them onto a truck. Michael instructed them to leave the boxes in the garage of his mother-in-law's house, along with a letter he had written the night before. Meanwhile, he contacted a locksmith and changed all the locks on the house. When Sarah came home from work that night, she would find her keys useless and her things at her mother's house. But Michael wasn't done yet. He did a quick online search and found information about Richard Thompson, including the address of his home where he lived with Patricia and their 2 teenagers. Michael decided Patricia deserved to know the truth just as much as he did. He also prepared a copy of the video and the evidence to send to the Human Resources Department of Sterling and Associates, since both Sarah and Richard had violated internal policies by using a corporate trip for personal purposes and maintaining an inappropriate relationship between employee and direct supervisor. At 5 in the afternoon, Michael had already organized everything for his final move. He prepared 3 distinct envelopes. The first contained copies of the video recorded by Josh, screenshot captures, and a respectful letter explaining the situation for Patricia Thompson, Richard's wife. The second envelope was addressed to the Human Resources Department of Sterling and Associates, containing the same evidence and a detailed explanation of how Sarah and Richard had used corporate resources to fund their extramarital relationship during the trip to Miami. The third envelope was for Sarah, containing copies of all the evidence and the divorce papers Michael had prepared with his lawyer. Michael wanted everyone involved to know the situation simultaneously, so no one had time to come up with excuses or destroy additional evidence. When Sarah arrived home at 8 o'clock that night, she found the door locked and her keys not working. She rang the doorbell insistently, shouting her name. Michael opened the door just slightly, enough to hand her a sealed envelope. Sarah tried to push the door open and enter, but Michael kept it firmly shut. She asked what was happening, if he had gone crazy, why her keys weren't working. Michael simply said in a low, controlled voice that she should read what was in the envelope and that her things were at her mother's house. Sarah opened the envelope right there on the porch. Inside were printed copies of the video Josh had recorded in Miami showing her and Richard kissing passionately in the hotel pool, along with the divorce papers Michael had filed that afternoon. Sarah turned pale, her hands shook, and she let some papers fall to the ground. She tried to speak, explain, apologize, but Michael closed the door gently and activated the house alarm. Sarah stayed outside for almost an hour, alternating between knocking on the door, crying, and calling Michael's cell phone, which he had turned off. The neighbors began to watch the scene, and Sarah eventually left, probably heading to her mother's house. The next morning, Michael woke up early and made breakfast for Emma and Jake as he always did. The kids asked where their mom was, and Michael explained in a simple and age-appropriate way that Mom and Dad were having some problems and that she would be staying at Grandma's for a while. He assured them they would continue seeing their mom regularly and that nothing was their fault. Emma, being older, seemed to understand that something serious was happening, but Jake just nodded and asked if he could put more honey on his cereal. Michael took them to school as always and went to work, trying to maintain normality for the kids. Throughout the day, he received dozens of calls and messages from Sarah, alternating between desperate pleas for forgiveness and threats to sue him for abandoning the household. Michael didn't respond to any messages, but saved them all as additional evidence. In the late afternoon, he received a call from the lawyer informing him that Patricia Thompson had contacted wanting more information about the situation. She had received the envelope Michael had sent and wanted to coordinate legal actions against Sarah and Richard. Michael authorized the lawyer to share all necessary information with Patricia's legal representation. The following week was a hurricane of consequences for Sarah and Richard. Patricia Thompson not only filed for divorce but also sued Richard for moral damages and breach of marital trust, using all the evidence Michael had provided. Sterling and Associates immediately launched an internal investigation after receiving proof that Sarah and Richard had maintained an inappropriate relationship and used company resources for personal encounters. The legal department of the agency determined that the trip to Miami had been misused, violating multiple internal policies on professional conduct and corporate expense usage. Richard was summarily fired from his position as executive director, losing not only his job but also all benefits and profit sharing accumulated. Sarah was also dismissed for just cause due to violation of professional conduct policies and inappropriate relationship with a superior. The scandal spread rapidly through the advertising circles in Denver, as Sterling and Associates was a respected company and the dismissal of 2 executives for misconduct became a topic among professionals in the city. Sarah tried several times to contact Michael, even showing up at his office, but he maintained his position of no direct communication, directing all questions to his lawyers. The kids began visiting their mom on alternating weekends, as established by the temporary custody agreement, but always returned home relieved, as Sarah was visibly shaken and emotionally unstable. 2 months after the discovery of the infidelity, Michael was sitting in his study, watching Emma and Jake do their homework at the kitchen table. The house had regained a piece he hadn't realized had been missing for so long. The kids adapted better than he had expected to the new routine, and he discovered he was more than capable of taking care of everything alone. Sarah had tried reconciliation through emotional letters and even couples therapy, but Michael knew there was no turning back. Trust had been broken irreparably, and he had completely lost respect for the woman who had shared 15 years of his life. Richard also tried to reach out a few times through mutual acquaintances, wanting to explain and minimize the situation, but Michael never responded. He heard through common contacts that Richard was facing serious financial problems due to the costly divorce and the difficulty finding a new executive position after the Sterling and Associates scandal became known in the market. Sarah had moved to a small apartment on the other side of town and was working in a much lower position than before, as her professional reputation had been severely damaged by the scandal and her termination for cause. Michael looked at the kids and felt a deep peace. He had protected his family the best way possible, acting with dignity and determination when he discovered the betrayal. He hadn't yelled, hadn't made public scandals, hadn't lowered himself to the level of lies and dishonesty. He had simply presented the truth clearly and allowed natural consequences to follow. Emma looked up from her books and asked if he was okay, noticing he was watching them with a thoughtful expression. Michael smiled genuinely for the first time in months and said everything was fine, that he was proud of the two of them, and that they were the most important thing in his life. Jake ran to him and gave a tight hug, saying he liked it when it was just the three of them at home because Dad made better pancakes than Mom. Michael laughed and promised to make special pancakes for breakfast the next day. That night, after the kids went to sleep, Michael sat in the backyard with a cup of coffee and reflected on everything that had happened. He didn't feel anger or bitterness, only a sense of closure and justice served. Sarah had made her choices, and he had responded proportionally and definitively. Now, he could focus on rebuilding his life and being the best father possible for Emma and Jake, knowing he had acted with integrity in one of the hardest moments of his life. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.